Hi everyone, I'm Danielle Byington, and in this video we're going to be covering Florence Nightingale. Florence Nightingale, if any of you happen to be nursing majors or planning to go to nursing school, is someone you're going to continue learning more about. That's the largest thing she's associated with. While she did have other contributions to society, she's really considered a pioneer in nursing science. She was called the Lady with the Lamp, sort of like the guardian angel of soldiers who would have otherwise died in the Crimean War. Um, she reportedly saved two-thirds of the soldiers who were beginning to fester from infections. These were people who weren't dying from fatal wounds on the battlefield, but coming back in from general wear and tear, scratches and such from being in battle, and those sorts of things, the lack of knowledge of hygiene and such, would soon turn into infection. And she understood the need to continue checking on them, the need for nutrition, the need for daily redressing of bandages and daily laundering of the linens they are lying in the bed. She really revolutionized the way nursing was practiced. Now, before she gets to that major reputation, though, she was born into a really wealthy family, and a lot of that shaped her ambitions to do what she did. Because as an elite member of society in the Victorian era, especially, as a woman, she would have been expected to not work, and it would look bad if she did. It would reflect bad on the family. And um, until she's 32 years old is when she finally writes the piece you were writing and really expresses all that disdain that she has for Victorian society. Now, the title comes from Cassandra, as in the priestess of the city of Troy, that is taken by the Greeks, destroyed by the Greeks. If you've ever read the Iliad, or it's also, of course, mentioned in the Odyssey and the Aeneid, and in other small splashes and other major pieces of literature as well. Cassandra is one of the princesses of Troy, and as a priestess, she is a priestess of Apollo. Apollo fell in love with her, as the myth goes, but because she denies him, this angers him, and so he curses her to, as a priestess, always be able to tell the truth, always foretell the future truthfully, correctly, but no one will ever believe her. No one will ever take her seriously. They just say she's crazy. So this is, obviously, this is what Florence Nightingale is paralleling how she felt in her own life in the Victorian era. So she is writing about the oppression of women in this time period. The Not so much a lack of option of to be educated, because coming from a wealthy family, she was able to, of course, be educated, but she's not able in adulthood to do anything with it because that is society's view. She says that it should only be natural that both sexes are allowed to pursue their interest and their ambitions. She says that first, even as babies, we are in awe of the natural world around us. And this is the thing she says is our first instinct in responding to nature, to the outside world, as we're learning about it as children. And she says that that is imagination and poetry. And here she's not just quite using poetry as, some of the things you've read in a class. It's not just like sonnets and rhyming words and such. It's poetry as in, like, there's something artistic that speaks to you as a human being, on a deeper level when you are looking at nature. So you might think of something like Percy Shelley's Mont Blanc. Um, she goes on to give a second example. She says, okay, and then after we are very young children, as we are growing up, what succeeds poetry and imagination is intellectual curiosity. You want to know more about the world around you. And now that could be something as simplistic as Googling a question and looking for answers. But this is also like the things you pursue, you pursuing interest, hobbies, you learn about its history, you learn about who are the major people involved in that field, whatever it might be. Now she is specifically going on to list things like sciences and the arts, but you could think of this as other things that interest you as well today in the modern world. Maybe that might be film or something in sports, that to have the leisure to get to pursue your interest in that, to have that opportunity is a privilege that a lot of people, depending on the context, we're talking about gender or race, or specifically also economic status. If you're working class, you don't have the privilege to pursue those types of interests. But she is specifically saying that women suffer this because of society prescribing them to be just totally tethered to the domestic. She says that even in a monastery, a nun would be afforded, even required, to have hours of thinking, of like meditating on the world around them. And it is sort of like prayer. So religion does play a big part of where she goes in life, because she states a number of times in her personal writings that God spoke to her and told her to pursue what she was pursuing with what we now know as nursing, and that was her purpose in life. And she firmly believed that insight that she felt in her mind. So when she questions gender roles, and saying like, why is it appropriate, why would we think it's funny to see men at the table in a drawing room instead of women? Like she's saying like, why is one thing acceptable and another not? And she says, it isn't that men are the problem, it's that society is the problem, because men would then, as she goes on to describe, feel ashamed of their household or themselves or their wives if the wife is spending all this other time pursuing her interests and the domestic things aren't getting done, and that even his dinner will not be as good. But she says that that's because of society and the prescribed behaviors we are all supposed to have. In the very end of the excerpt that you are assigned to read, she doesn't just ask, when will a woman come along who challenges this? She essentially predicts that it will happen. When will there be uh, a woman who challenges this, who wants to pursue her ambitions and doesn't let these views of society hold her back? And she says that woman will be the savior of our race. Now, in retrospect, she she could be talking about herself, but it's really a collective of women who break those barriers over time, before the Victorian era, during it, and after, of course. All right, so that is all for this video. Thank you for watching.